What's up guys, Londrick here, and now I'm back with another edition of Lundrick's Fave 5. Now this time we're going to continue the WCW theme. We've had last two Fave 5s was Clash of the Champions and Halloween Havoc. And now we're into November and we're talking about the original November pay-per-view. And that is Fave 5 Starrcade matches. Before there was WrestleMania, the original supercard, the original supercard was Starrcade. And this was WCW's flagship, or the NWA's flagship show, which ran from 1983 all the way to the year 2000. So many great matches on this show. So a lot of great matches won't be on this list. After all, it's only a Fave 5. So next Fave 5 edition, I'm probably going to do Starrcade shows. I've done stuff like that in the past, so you know what that's all about. Let's rattle off a few honourable mentions before we get to the actual video. Some honourable mentions. The Rock and Roll Express versus Arn and Ole Anderson from 1986. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Tully Blanchard from 1984. Midnight Express versus the original Midnight Express from 1988. Sting versus Big Van Vader, King of the Cables final 1992. Dean Malenko vs Ultimo Dragon 1996. Rey Mysterio vs Billy Kidman vs Juventud Guerrero in 1998. So many great matches on this list. We can only have a Fave 5. So let's get down to it. Coming in at number 5, and you're going to see this guy quite a lot on this list. 1988 for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Ric Flair vs Lex Luger. Culmination of a long storyline and a great main event for a great Starrcade. Will this be on the Starrcade list next week or the week after, whenever I do it? Stay tuned, you'll find out. So this one's really interesting match. This is obviously the main event, the very first official WCW pay-per-view, and I'll get into why that is in a little bit. So this one pretty much, you can trace this back to Luger getting into the business. So at the time, 1980s wrestling, especially the mid-80s, was pretty much all about the bodybuilder physiques. I mean, this was definitely the time of 300-pound monsters, 275 monsters, just fantastic bodies and all that. Now, you can argue about how they got those bodies, but if you watch a wrestling show from the 1980s, you'll see a lot of huge bodies. So this is the era of Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, the Road Warriors, Kerry Von Erich, those kind of people. So the wrestling business in the 1980s was ripe for a guy like Lex Luger to get into. Lex Luger, of course, did not grow up a wrestling fan, was a professional footballer for a while. When his career ended, he decided he wanted to do something athletic, so got into pro wrestling. I mean, picture a 1980s pro wrestler in your head, and you'll probably think of something that looks a bit like Lex Luger. Tall, long blonde hair, huge body, tanned, just looked like a superstar. I mean, probably in the 1980s, Lex Luger, probably one of the best looks for a pro wrestler ever. So he got into the business in about 1985, really starting the Florida territory. And because this was the time when Hulk Hogan was the WWF champion, all that, that's what the promoters wanted, that's what the fans wanted. So Lex Luger in professional wrestling seemed like a perfect fit. So he did the Florida thing for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Then he comes at the NWA in 1987. And not just for any old spot, just a fantastic spot he got. So this coincided with the same time the original Four Horsemen, Arn, Ole, Flair and Tully. Ole was on his way out. I think Ole was getting a bit older. I think Ole was in his 40s at the time, so older than the rest of the Four Horsemen. He was he'd been a wrestler for a long time. He wanted to get off the road. He had a son that was amateur wrestling, so he was training him to do that. So Ole leaves the Horsemen, gets kicked out the Horsemen, leaves the company. So you can't really have a three Horsemen, right? Because that just wouldn't sound right, would it? So the Horsemen recruited a brand new Horseman, and that Horseman was Lex Luger. So there you go, right off the bat, this guy feels like a big deal, looks like a star, and he's thrust into this mega faction, the Four Horsemen. And I think Luger was a good fit, I really do. For one, I feel like just obviously his youth and all that was perfect for the Four Horsemen. And I feel like the feeling probably was, well, this guy's not a particularly good worker yet, but he's got potential. So having worked closely with Flair, Arn and Tully, and even JJ Dillon, and he'll get better because you can have JJ Dillon be the manager doing the promos for him, and then like being on the road with Flair, Arn and Tully, and then work with all these great baby faces. Will definitely teach him how to be better in the ring. And what I thought he brought to the table as well, because at the time the NWA had some big powerful baby faces such as Nikita Koloff and the Road Warriors. But then obviously Flair, Arn and Tully don't really look like monsters. Not really power guys. So now the Four Horsemen had that in them. That power guy that could match power and strength with the Road Warriors, can match power with Nikita Koloff. So really did that. So Luke was in the Horsemen for about a year. Was a United States champion. Had a feud with Dusty Rhodes. Even wrestled Dusty Rhodes a year prior to Starrcade 87. But I think after a while the feeling was there was more money in this guy as a babyface, wrestling with Ric Flair, chasing the NWA World Heavyweight title. So in early 88, Lex Luger turns babyface. How this came around with the annual Bunkhouse Stampede. The crack was that the Horsemen were going to step aside and let JJ Dillon take this one. Guess it's a goodwill gesture, but Lex Luger refused to do it, refused to take a dive, and won the Bunkhouse Stampede himself, saying he's not going to take a dive. JJ Dillon's a manager, he doesn't deserve this. So Luger's then kicked out of the Horsemen and then starts feud with the Horsemen. This led to him and Barry Windham facing Arn and Tully at the first Clash of Champions, win the NWA Tag Team titles. Then eventually Barry Windham turns on Lex Luger and then becomes the fourth Horseman. And for me, Flair, Anderson, Blanchard, Barry Windham, JJ Dillon, that's my favourite version of the Horseman. I feel that is definitely the best version of the Horseman of all time, and maybe the best faction in pro wrestling ever, period. I think so, anyway. But then after that, Lex Luger starts chasing Ric Flair for the NWA title. They have a big match at the Great American Bash 1988 pay-per-view, which ends in controversy as they did the classic Bloodstock finish, but this one was kind of weak, to be honest with you. Number one, Lex Luger wasn't really bleeding that much. I mean, we've seen so many title matches where guys have bled so much more, including Ric Flair, and no stoppage. But this one got stopped. They just said that the State Athletic Commission doctor at the ringside stopped the match because of blood loss. And the other stupid thing is, and I know I kind of did this to make it look like Luger had the title won, but Luger had Flair in the torture rack, and that's when the referee stopped the match. So, not the referee, the doctor. So he really could have just waited for Flair to submit to the torture rack, but whatever. So then the plan was for them to go all the way to Starrcade of this one. But then in the meantime, something interesting happened in the company. Everything fell apart, really. I mean, it'd be too much of a long video to explain all the reasons of how and why Jim Crockett Promotions eventually died. But the company was on its arse. And then Ted Turner steps in, buys the company. And then the NWA becomes WCW. And obviously in the meantime as well, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard leave the company. So by the time this match happened, the Horseman wasn't really a thing anymore. And the NWA was now World Championship Wrestling. So a long build up, we get the match. This was an awesome match, an absolute classic match. I mean, as I said in the previous video, Lex Luger gets ragged on about for being a supposedly bad wrestler, but he really wasn't. He had some awesome matches in his career, and this was maybe the best. I would say either this match or the Flair Wrestle War 90 match. I mean, Ric Flair just in the 1980s was just one of the best wrestlers ever. Close to perfection, from my opinion, to be honest with you. But one of the things he was great at is taking someone who was quite green and didn't quite have a skill set and carrying them to a classic match. He did it earlier in the year when him and Sting had that 45-minute draw at the Clash of the Champions, and he would do it again. And he did it here for Luger as well. Not to say that Luger was bad, but obviously in these matches, Flair was definitely the leader in them. But Luger did a good job of keeping up with Flair. They told a nice story. Luger being the strong power guy, probably being able to physically dominate Flair, but Flair being the veteran, knowing all the tricks and the trades, having all the skills, and be able to fight back against Lex Luger. It's an awesome match. Went about nearly 30 minutes as well, so I've got a lot of time in there. Great match. Finish was awesome as well. Because Flair attacked Lex Luger's leg throughout the match, so that would make sense, right? Luger's a bigger guy than Ric Flair. Ric Flair's finish is a figure 4 leg lock. So in that situation, you would work on the leg, wouldn't you? He did that. So then eventually did a spot where Luger had Flair in the torch rack, although this time Luger's leg buckled because Flair had worked on it for so long. Flair puts the feet on the ropes. Ric Flair retains the NWA title. And that was that. Now, a lot of people think that Lex Luger should have went over in this one. And yeah, at the time, I'd say, yeah, maybe he should have. But then you got to think hindsight. What happened right after this? Ricky Steamboat came back to the company to reignite the Ric Flair-Ricky Steamboat rivalry, which led to some of the greatest matches of all time in 1989. So I'm going to assume at this point it was known that Ricky Steamboat was coming back. He must have been, because he came back like mere weeks later, maybe even less than that. So I think at this point it was already established that Steamboat was coming back to reignite his rivalry with Flair. So Luger was kind of a casualty in that. I think if it wasn't for that, if Ricky Steamboat wasn't coming back to the company, would have been the perfect time to put the world title on Lex Luger. But it is what it is. It never happened. But however, despite all that, this match is amazing. And if you haven't seen it, you definitely need to check it out. Coming at number 4, we're going all the way back to the original Starrcade and Flair for the Gold steel cage match for the NWA Heavyweight Championship of the World. Harley Race versus Ric Flair. So there also has to be a first. The first WrestleMania main event was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. But the first Starrcade main event ever was Ric Flair Harley Race steel cage match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Iconic match, probably one of the great old school matches of all time. This match won't be for everyone, I don't think, because it is very slow paced and very old school and very much a product of his time. But I thought this match was awesome. Loved this match. Great story and just great iconic moment, really. So this probably had one of the best builds to a world title match ever. And I'm saying that, 36 years later? I mean, so obviously it's Ric Flair was the NWA champion in 1981, held the title for a while. But before Ric Flair, one of the truly great world heavyweight champions was Harley Race. Throughout the 70s and early 80s, Harley Race at this point, before this rivalry, was a 6-time world heavyweight champion. Great champion. In many ways, the guy Ric Flair had to try and emulate more than anything. I mean, when you think of the travelling NWA world champion, you think of Ric Flair, and you think of Harley Race, and I guess you think of someone like Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk, maybe. But in about June of 1983, Harley Race wins back the world heavyweight title from Ric Flair. They become a 7-time world champion. Now, this is officially his last proper reign as world champion. I mean, there was a disputed title reign back in 1984, but we don't need to get into that one. But the goal of this one was really to get the belt back onto Harley Race, to build a great story, to give Ric Flair his crown achievement. I mean, when Ric Flair won the title originally, it was in Kansas City against Dusty Rhodes, but there wasn't really a big build-up for it or anything. And it was in Kansas City as well, which is not either guy's home territory. So the plan was that Jim Crockett Promotions was going to put this big show on Thanksgiving in the Greensboro Coliseum, and Ric Flair was going to get his moment. So Jim Crockett had this big idea to hold this mega event, which was going to be broadcast on closed-circuit television all around the country. This obviously was pre-pay-per-view days, so that's how you did things back then. There was a locations around the country which showed it in a venue, that's how it happened. So they were really going to try and take us all across the country, and not just in the mid-Atlantic area as wrestling had been forever, territorial. And obviously this concept, Vince McMahon took this concept 2 years later and just made it so much better, and that created WrestleMania. So I wouldn't say Vince stole the concept from Crockett, but he definitely borrowed what Jim Crockett did, added all the celebrities, added all the glitz and glamour, and just made it so much bigger. But that's another story for another time. And on this show, this was going to be headlined by Ric Flair versus Harley Race in a steel cage match. But we had a hell of a storyline to get there. So it really started when Harley Race declared he wanted Ric Flair out of his life. He was sick of dealing with Ric Flair for all this time, and he was going to make a deal. He's going to offer any wrestler in there $25,000 to take out Ric Flair, injure Ric Flair, and eliminate him from professional wrestling for good. Now, WWE took the storyline and copied it some 20 years later when Triple H did the same thing in the feud of Bill Goldberg in 2003. Although for inflation purposes, that feud had Triple H offering wrestlers $100,000 to take out Goldberg in 2003, compared to the $25,000 in 1983 that Harley Race had for Ric Flair. And eventually, after a while, the bounty was collected. Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater attacked Ric Flair, gave him a big pile driver, supposedly broke Ric Flair's neck and put him out of wrestling. But what made the sting even more is Orton and Slater were Ric Flair allies, so Harley Race had gotten these guys to turn on Ric Flair, turn them heel. They collected the bounty, and it looked like, yeah, Ric Flair's career was over, it seemed like. It seemed like Ric Flair had a broken neck. He was getting out of professional wrestling. Mission accomplished for Harley Race, but not so fast. Ric Flair eventually recovered and decided, after not listening to the doctors, he was not going to retire. He was going to come back and face Harley Race, who won for the World Heavyweight title. And that match was eventually going to take place at Starrcade. And he came up with a great tagline, I thought. I thought it was a great tagline. Ric Flair said he was going to call his quest for the World Heavyweight title a Flair for the Gold. So Flair spelled F-L-A-R-E. And it was a nice play on words, you know. It just made a great tagline. So the whole build up for this match was great. This felt like a mega match between two mega stars and two guys who just wanted to beat the shit out of each other. Ric Flair was coming back for the world title, and he was going to do it in Greensboro, his home territory, his fans. So there was a clear babyface, there was a clear heel. Everyone wanted Ric Flair to win. Harley Race was so hated, so build-up was magnificent. And for me, the match was great. Like I said before, very old school, very slow pace, very much telling the story in the ring. So if you're used to your typical Young Bucks match and stuff like that, this match might not be for you, but I thought this match was great. I thought it was an absolute, the intensity was fantastic. Everything about. One thing I will say, I say, didn't kill the match or anything, but certainly didn't help it, is they had a special guest referee for this match. And that was former NWA champion Gene Kiniski. And I just got to say this, Gene Kiniski in this match was probably one of the worst special guest referees of all time. But he did an absolutely horrific job. I mean, a good referee does not get in the way. In fact, a good referee, you barely notice he's even there, to be honest with you. He doesn't detract from the match. But this guy's getting in the way all the time. So every time he'd go to a corner and attack them in the corner, he'd keep breaking up every single time. Despite the fact it's a fucking cage match. There's no disqualification. There's no rules in this match. So stop it. He didn't do it once or twice. He did it, I don't have the exact number because I couldn't be asked to count, but he must have did it about 10 times. Jesus Christ. Just awful, awful, awful. There was a lot of blood in this match because this is an intense match, so it needed a lot of blood. I mean, you had it so, look, could Ric Flair overcome? At that point, I think a lot of people were calling Harley Race the greatest NWA champion of all time. And yes, he did. With a crossbody off the top rope, Ric Flair and Gene Kiniski got involved in that one as well. He got involved in the finish. Harley Race, he got in the way and Harley Race tripped over him. Ric Flair landed on him. 1, 2, 3. Ric Flair's done it. Ric Flair is a brand new World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. And this kind of felt like the coronation of Ric Flair being the man. Because his first World title run was good, but I don't think it was great. I think at the time, Ric Flair was still not quite the finished article yet, but by the time he won it back in 1983, I think he was at the top of his game and he was really ready to go on and be the world heavyweight champion that he became, and he needed it. He needed to get a big win on a major show over a megastar like Harley Race. It's typical wrestling storytelling, really. The old champion passes the torch to the new champion, and this definitely felt like a torch passing moment. I mean, this was pretty much the beginning and the end of Harley Race's career. I mean, he hung around after that, most notably went to WWF and became King Harley Race, but he was older by this point. I think at this point, obviously, Harley Race's time as a top guy was over, and Ric Flair was going to be the new man to lead professional wrestling going forward. And obviously, the end of all the baby faces congratulate Flair, celebrating and all that. Ric Flair cutting the typical humble babyface promo, thanking the fans for being behind him and all that. I mean, if Ric Flair's obviously more famous for being an awesome heel, but if you want to see him as a great babyface, I would say this is one you should definitely check out. I think this defines Ric Flair. This is probably Ric Flair's best ever work as a babyface. I would say two rivalries really. This one and the Terry Funk 89 feud was probably Ric Flair's best ever work as a good guy. So like I say, this match is awesome. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. Coming in number 3, and we're sticking with Starrcade 1983. So yes, Ric Flair versus Harley Race was the iconic main event, but I would argue another match stole that show on this very same card, and that's the famous dog collar match with Roddy Piper versus Greg the Hammer Valentine. So much like Flair and Race, this was a big time feud at the time. I guess you could call this the number 2 feud in the company at the time. Even though Greg Valentine's a US champion, this was not for the US champion, which I thought was a bit strange. So these guys have been feuding for quite a while over the US title, trading the belts back and forth. This was a blood feud. Two guys just wanted to beat the shit out of each other, and they had a big match at Starrcade as well. Now, this was one of the most interesting concepts ever. So they came up with a special match, a dog collar match. So what they would do, they had a massive chain with dog collars on them. Dog collars were put around the guy's neck. There was even spikes on the dog collar, and so basically they were tied together. So basically Valentine could not get away from Piper. Valentine was connected to Piper, so there was no way Greg Valentine could weasel out of this match, not get a count out, not get disqualified, nothing. Piper was going to get his chance for revenge over Valentine. And the violence in this match for me, match was a pure violent match. It was an absolute epic. I thought the story was absolutely magnificent in this one. You could just tell these guys wanted to beat the crap out of each other. And at the time, a dog collar match, such a unique concept, because we had that similar kind of matches like Indian strap matches and things like that. I mean, I've had the Russian chain matches and stuff like that, but never something like this where they would connect each other by the necks on dog collars as well. So this match was just so brutal, absolutely fantastic match. At the time, I really like Greg Valentine's work. I think obviously at the time, 1980s, especially when we went to the WWF, it was all about big characters and all that. But Greg Valentine was not really a personality at all. He was just this rugged bastard who could work his arse off, had such a stiff, believable style. I was not the best mic guy in the world at all, to be honest. I think that's why he worked well in the WWF when he had Jimmy Hart doing the talking for him. But in the NWA, I mean, he'd been around for a long time. The son of wrestler Johnny Valentine came into the promotion in the late 70s, teaming up with Ric Flair. Even had runs in the WWF. Had a feud with Bob Backlund, some great matches there. He was just a solid wrestler, just badass, rough and tough. I think he'd kind of be over now if he was in the indie scene or something like that now. I think he'd be great for modern New Japan wrestling. Greg Valentine in his prime. Something like him and Tomohiro Ishii, I think, or him versus Shingo or Minoru Suzuki or something like that would be absolute badass. At the time, he was a US champion, so Ric Flair was. So I think him and Flair even had a few matches as well. And then you got Roddy Piper, one of the biggest personalities in the business, one of the best mic workers. And when you want him to be, he could be really a big tough guy. And I think this match did a great job of making Piper seem like a tough guy. I mean, the stiffness in this match. Just watch this match and tell me these guys aren't laying it in. They did a storyline where Piper's ear was hurt, Piper's ear was bleeding, Piper was Valentine was pounding on Piper's ear throughout this match. They were talking about how because that Piper couldn't keep equilibrium and all that. Then Roddy Piper does the big comeback, wraps up Greg Valentine in the chains, just really beats the crap out of him. Then Piper ends up tying Valentine in the chain and getting the pin. So it seemed like Roddy Piper had won the US title, because all indications were this was a US title match, right? But at the end of the match, the commentator was like, no, this is not a US title match. So they kind of didn't make it clear, but it turns out after all this was not a US title match after all, which I thought was a bit strange. But that doesn't matter really. When you think of Roddy Piper, you don't really think of many awesome wrestling matches. Think of Piper, you think of his promo work a lot more. You think of some of the crazy stuff he did with Mr. T. Some of his awesome heel work and he feuded with Hulk Hogan. You definitely think of Piper's Pit. But there aren't that many awesome Roddy Piper matches out there, I would say. The two matches you really need to check out if you want to see what Roddy Piper could do in the ring was this one right here, then the one with Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8. But yeah, so in a great show like Starrcade, this one stole the show for me. Feel like how only 36 years still holds up as a brutal, violent, awesome match. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Coming at number 2, Steel Cage I Quit match for the United States Heavyweight Championship. Magnum TA vs Tully Blanchard. In my personal opinion, this is the best Starrcade match of all time. But as I've said many times before, when I do a Fave 5 list, I do a subjective list, not an objective list. So there's one match of Starrcade history which I personally like more, but I'll acknowledge from an objective standpoint, this one was the best. For me, this is one of the best pro wrestling matches of the 1980s, especially one of the best 80s matches not involving Ric Flair. 1985, The Gathering, Starrcade, Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA. Another one, the end of a big rivalry. So these guys have been feuding for God knows months and months and months over the United States title. Various finishes and all that. Various different finishes, screw jobs and that sort of thing. But so they led to the Ultimate. I mean, it doesn't get much more final than this, especially in the 1980s. I mean, later on you have things like Hell in a Cell and stuff like that, and Elimination Chambers. But back in the 1980s, the Ultimate feud ending match was the classic Steel Cage match. The chain link fence, no roof on the top. This was a match you had when two guys could not be separated and they needed to just have the big fight at the end. But this one took that little bit step further. It was inside of a steel cage, but there was also an I Quit match as well, which I think is the only time this has ever happened. We've had both in it's a 2-for-1 type thing, both matches in one. And obviously the I Quit match means exactly that. There are no pinfalls, there are no disqualifications, there are no count-outs. The only way to win is to get your opponent to say I quit on the microphone. That was fought as the ultimate bragging right. To not only beat your opponent, to beat him up, but to get another man to say that he quits, that you're the better man. So, obviously, Tully Blanchard, I mean, what can I say? Awesome worker. I mean, modern fans are now starting to get to know him again because of him being Sean Spears' manager in the AEW. But back in the day, Tully Blanchard was one of the best. Came through in about 1984, had a big feud with Ricky Steamboat over the television title, wound up getting J.J. Dillon as manager and becoming United States champion. This period is right before the Four Horsemen was forming. I mean, I think there'd definitely been some seeds planted at this point, but they wouldn't truly form until early 1986. But I think the problem Tully had really had been a top guy. His gimmick and character was kind of similar to Flair's. The flashy, flamboyant, wearing the suits, talking about being for women, having all the cars and limousines and all that. So Tully kind of felt like a light version of Flair, looking back on it. And obviously at the time, Tully was not going to be not going to be top guy over Ric Flair, but put him in the US title, and I think that was an absolutely perfect spot for him. He was a great heel as well. I mean, great heel, great technical wrestler, great in the ring, great on the microphone. Probably a bit smaller than you would expect of a 1980s wrestler. I think Tully was under 6 foot and about 220 pounds, which he wouldn't be a small guy now, but I think back then he definitely was seen as a smaller guy. And then you got Magnum TA, really working class guy, drove around his Harley Davidsons, wore blue jeans, cowboy boots, had the mustache. Just seemed like a normal everyday guy, that working class guy, a really fight the corporate greed type of guy the Flair and Tully Blanchard portrayed. Magnum, this guy just looked like a star as well. How Magnum TA came about is he kind of had that Tom Selleck look. He kind of looked a bit like Tom Selleck, who of course was a massive TV star at the time in the show Magnum PI. So Magnum TA, Terry Allen, so his name was Terry Allen, so I have no idea, I can't remember who coined him Magnum TA, I'm not sure, I can't remember, but before he put Terry Allen, TA, Magnum TA was born, and I thought that was a great name, I really do. And then Magnum was a good wrestler, not a fantastic wrestler I don't think, but a good wrestler. But I think his real strength was his obviously his looked like a star, obviously popular with the women and all that. I think all the guys liked him because he seemed like just a cool guy that you go to the bar and have a beer with. But I think his promo work was probably his strong point. His look and his promo work were definitely his strong point. I mean, great on the microphone, just looked like a star, in great shape. And him and Tully have this massive rivalry which spans for months and months and months. They have this big blow off at Starrcade, like I say, steel cage, I quit match. In 1980s pro wrestling, does not really get more final than that. And God, this match is a classic for me. One of the best. If you want to watch a 1980s match that doesn't involve Ric Flair, I'll say, I'll probably say Savage Steamboat from WrestleMania 3. But okay, for NWA match that doesn't involve Ric Flair, this has got to be one. Just the intensity. What I love, it just looked like the story they were telling. You could believe that these guys hated each other and wanted to beat the shit out of each other. And I kind of feel like it's a little bit missing in wrestling nowadays, because I feel like stuff like this being replaced by guys doing cool looking spots. I mean, I don't want to be that guy that goes, goddamn wrestling these days, all the flips and all that. But I think there's definitely some truth. Guys would rather do some cool looking moves than tell a story that portray that these guys just want to beat the crap out of each other. So I just love the intensity, how like seriously getting like screaming at each other to say it, and they would get like more and more intense as it went on. A nice back and forth match. This match didn't actually go that long. I think this match probably went like less than 15 minutes, but the pace was incredible and it was just such a brutal match. Both guys bled, but then eventually Tully tried to get out the steel cage, brought one of the classic wooden chairs into the ring. Eventually that wooden chair got broken off, and Magnum had the wooden leg in Tully Blanchard's eye, screamed to say it, and then Tully said these words to end the match: "Yes, yes, yes." So the match was over. Magnum TA did beat Tully Blanchard. He did make him submit. However, he didn't make Tully Blanchard say I quit, did he? Tully Blanchard just said yes. So that was kind of interesting how they didn't have Tully Blanchard say I quit. They had him say yes. Well, maybe it's not that interesting. Maybe I'm just talking shite here. But for me, this match is a classic. I mean, for me, 5 stars all the way. I mean, if you haven't seen this match, definitely check it out. And I have a feeling you might hear a little bit more about Starrcade 1985 coming up. Coming in number 1, like I said, not the greatest match in Starrcade history, but my personal favourite. And this one's kind of like the odd one out. Every other match has been from the 1980s versions of Starrcade, but this one, from 1993, main event, world title, WCW World Championship versus Korea, Big Van Vader versus Ric Flair. Oh boy, there's quite a bit to cover in this. I mean, So I'll try and briefly explain all the details because I don't want to be going on for this like 20-25 minutes, which I could do. So for me, this match is probably the most, maybe Hogan and Sting for all the wrong reasons, but maybe the most, for the right reasons, maybe the most famous Starrcade match ever. And it was a Starrcade main event that was never meant to be. So originally, the idea was for this Starrcade 1993 main event to be a Battle of the Monsters. Big Van Vader was going to defend the World Heavyweight title against Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious was going to turn babyface, challenge his former partner Vader, and they're going to have a big Battle of the Monsters, like the immovable object versus the irresistible force. So it was all set up. They were building Sid up to be the World Heavyweight Champion, to be the top babyface going in 1994. However, plans will change. So, as a pretty famous story, WCW had a European tour in about October 1993. They were staying in a hotel at Blackburn, England. Then a massive argument breaks out between Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. Arn and Sid get into a big, massive fight. One of the most famous out of the ring real fights in wrestling history. And one of those, it just got ridiculous out of hand. Where got to the point where Sid was stabbing Arn Anderson repeatedly with scissors. I think both guys got cut in there, but I think Sid's the one that really took it too far, and both guys nearly died. That's not an exaggeration. Both guys had so many wounds that if they didn't get to the hospital in time, both guys could have seriously died, and that's not an exaggeration. So imagine the PR for WCW then, how horrific that would have been. So of course this makes all the headlines. As far as I know, it was in all the newspapers over here and stuff like that. Everyone was talking about this big incident. So as a result of this, Sid is then fired from WCW. So you fired Sid, so now you don't have a Starrcade main event. What the hell do you do? So this forced WCW to go back to the tried and tested. And we look at the WCW roster at the time. Who was going to be the guy to face Vader? Ric Flair. Ric Flair was the guy. So you got to think. I suppose they could have went for Sting, but I think there was definitely a sense of being there, done that with Sting and Vader. Sting and Vader had their rivalry. They didn't really need to wrestle again. Maybe it could have went to Cactus Jack, but I feel like their big match of Halloween Havoc was kind of feud ending as well. And as far as other baby faces, I think Davey Boy Smith had left the company, so he couldn't really go with him. Ric Flair was the guy. Ric Flair was back in the company. He came back in early 1993 after a year and a half away from the WWF. But interestingly, what was interesting about Flair in 1993 is to get out of his WWF contract, he had to sign a clause which meant he couldn't actually wrestle for the length of his WWF contract round. So for the first 8-9 months of Flair back in 1993, Flair was not wrestling. Flair was doing a talk show segment called Flair for the Gold. I mean, you go back to 83, Ric Flair had a talk show segment called Flair for the Gold. And Flair didn't return to the company until September when him and Arn wrestled the Hollywood Blondes at that Clash of the Champions. And then Flair had a feud with Rick Rude over the WCW International title or the Big Gold Belt. I mean, that's a whole nother issue. We don't need to go into that one. But Flair and Rude, they had some okay matches, but I think definitely disappointing. And I've always been curious if this whole thing with Sid didn't happen, what would Flair have actually done in this Starrcade? I mean, I guess he probably would have faced Rick Rude one last time, but I don't know. It's kind of funny, really. So because of the whole Sid situation, Flair became in, and then, because I guess by happy coincidence, this Starrcade was going to take place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it also happened to be the 10th anniversary of Starrcade as well. So when was it? So Starrcade in 1993, Starrcade took place in 1983. So, and kind of like what Hulk Hogan was to early WrestleMania, Ric Flair definitely was Mr. Starrcade. I mean, look, you got to look at this. Obviously, the first Starrcade we just talked about, then he main evented both 84 and 85 with Dusty Rhodes. Main evented 1986 with Nikita Koloff, Won the NWA title again in 1987 against Ronnie Garvin in the main event. Main event Starrcade 88 if Lex Luger was recovered. Him and Sting were the main event of the Iron Man tournament in 1989. Then, the Black Scorpion in 1990, but we don't need to get into that. And of course, with Flair being gone from the company, he missed Starrcade 91 and 92. And now he's back for 1993. And it was in Charlotte as well, where even in 1993, Ric Flair was pretty much a god in Charlotte. North Carolina in general, really. That was always Ric Flair country. And Ric Flair was seen as a wrestling icon even by 1993. He'd had that long career, been around for a long time, was the man. But at the time it looked like the ultimate underdog story. Ric Flair was getting older now, which is kind of ironic when you think of 1993 as a time where it looked like Ric Flair could conceivably retire. And then he wrestled for another 15 years after that. And then you got the ultimate monster in Vader, Big Van Vader. Vader in 1993, wow. Probably the best super heavyweight of all time in terms of in-ring work, I would say so. I mean, Vader was a big star in New Japan Pro Wrestling for a long time. Had big matches with Antonio Inoki, Stan Hansen, all that. Wrestled on and off for WCW for a while. I think he had his first match in 1990, but at the time he was still actively working with New Japan, so he was never a full-time member of the WCW roster, so he would come in for certain shots and all that, and he would do this in 1991 as well. But I think it was 1992 where Vader became WCW full-time. He had a big match with Sting at the Great American Bash in 1992, the first big match together. And then Vader shocked the world by beating Sting clean as a whistle to win the World Heavyweight title. And just Vader, at that point, Vader was seen as this unstoppable monster. I mean, WCW booked him as such a badass monster heel. And the fans bought it. I mean, you watch Vader work, you think, damn, this guy is fucking killing his opponents. Wow. Just the intensity of Vader's work. I think it's not so much that Vader could do all these cool moves, although he was extremely agile for his size. It's a fact, like, he just looked like his intensity, just believability in the ring looked like he was absolutely killing his opponents. I think bigger guys now could definitely study Vader's work and try to emulate Vader in so many ways. Maybe someone like Kevin Owens could watch Vader's matches and try to emulate that, or people like Braun Strowman and people like that. I mean, God, and so many great matches Vader had throughout his title reign. So he was champion up until August of 1992, where he dropped the title to Ron Simmons in a very famous match, and then won the title back right at the very end of 1992 over Ron Simmons, and then pretty much dominated almost the entirety of 1993 as champion, except for a brief period in the European tour. I guess this is probably about April of 1993, something like that. May or April of 1993, maybe even March, not sure. There was a match in London where Sting shocked the world by beating Vader to win the World Heavyweight title, because this didn't happen. Obviously, when pay-per-views became a thing and like big television specials, which should class as champions, or in WWF terms, Saturday Night's Main Event and stuff like that. Title changes in house shows more or less became a thing of the past. You didn't see it very often. So the London crowd are absolutely gobsmacked when Sting won the World Heavyweight title. But Sting did not finish the tour as champion. A few days later, they had a match in Ireland where Vader won the world title back. Then he kept doing his thing. So obviously he had the big match with Sting, most notably the strap match at Super Brawl. Had a few matches with Davey Boy Smith. Had a few really good television matches with Ricky Steamboat, including a great lumberjack match if you haven't seen that one. Then the Cactus Jack feud, which we talked about in the last Fave fight. And of course, like I say, this is all set up to have a massive showdown with fellow Monster Sid. But of course, obviously, for reasons I explained, that was out and Flair was in, so they stumbled on something magical, really, the ultimate underdog story. Could this aging former champion go back to his hometown 10 years after he won the title at the very first Starrcade, and can he overcome this mammoth monster Vader? And to add to the story, which made it just so much more interesting, Who was Vader's manager during this time? That's right, Harley Race. So by this point, Harley Race retired from the ring, became a manager, and him and Vader did some great work as manager and client. So Flair, then obviously to get this match, Ric Flair had his career on the line. If he couldn't win the title on this night, he would retire. Ha! So yeah, just kind of funny how even by 1993, Ric Flair was doing retirement stipulations. At the time, it seemed like it would make perfect sense for Ric Flair to retire in 1993, but of course, like I said before, wrestled for another 15 years after that. But so yeah, and this just felt like a big match, and they built it up to feel like such a real story of this legendary performer coming back. Can he have one last big great moment to beat this great monster? So they built it up like the build up was fantastic, and then we get the Starrcade. And did you see AEW Dynamite last week, where they had Cody Rhodes and Tony Schiavone getting on their aeroplane, then the limousine ride to the Dynamite show? Well, this was actually a copy of something WCW did in the build-up for this match. They had Mean Gene Okerlund pick Ric Flair up at his house, where Ric Flair was saying goodbye to his family, including actually a very, very young Charlotte, or Ashley is her real name. I guess Charlotte / Ashley was probably about 6-7 years old at the time. So there you go. If you want to see a cameo of a child Charlotte, watch Starrcade 1993. And obviously Flair and Mean Gene were in the limo talking about the match and all that. So it was pretty much, well, not pretty much. AEW did actually directly copied this thing, but it's cool. It was great. Then the match itself, wow, what a match! Absolute classic match. I mean, when you think of WCW in 1993, you think of a lot. There was a lot of crap that year in pro wrestling in general, because WWF was pretty bad as well. But this match for me is definitely the highlight of WCW 1993. Hell, yeah, actually no, I'd probably say Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect King Ring is a little bit better, but just I love this match. Just Ric Flair being totally overmatched but refusing to back down. They're dominating most of the match. Ric Flair making his comebacks. He would throw chops and stuff like that. He was really trying to chop the big monster down, but Vader was staying on him and on him and on him. I think the good story is Ric Flair was trying to take Vader along, because Vader over 400 pounds, you could argue, yeah, he's a badass monster, but does he have the stamina to go a long time? And if I do take him long, can I take advantage and then get him beat? So that was kind of how it went. So yeah, as much as Flair was trying to fight back, Vader was keeping the pressure on. Ric Flair eventually makes his comeback like all valiant babyfaces should. It's really a simple story, really. A babyface should be overmatched, but his fighting spirit should bring him through to the end. And then eventually Ric Flair hurts Vader's leg, gets him in a big roll-up. 1, 2, 3. Ric Flair does it. Ric Flair saves his career. Wins the World Heavyweight title one more time at Starrcade. Wow, this is an iconic moment. I mean, being in Charlotte as well, the fans were all Flair fans in that arena that night. I think a magical story was told in this match. I really do. Just awesome match. I mean, and obviously Ric Flair at the age of, I think he was coming to be 45 years old, gets the World Heavyweight title back, and just, like I said, iconic moment, really iconic match. And big ups to Vader for going out there and putting Flair over like a motherfucker. I mean, Vader did an awesome job in this match. And one of Ric, because I think after this, like in the mid-90s, Ric Flair lost a step after this. I mean, on occasion, you could still be awesome, but I think when he was getting to his mid-40s in the mid-1990s, you saw far less of Ric Flair's awesome in-ring work. So this was really one of Ric Flair's last truly amazing matches. I mean, don't get me wrong, he still had some great matches after this, but this was probably one of Ric Flair's last truly amazing Ric Flair-like performances for me. Awesome match, and for me, my favourite Starrcade match of all time. So that is a wrap, guys. Thanks for watching. I've got a little bit of a plan this week. I mean, if I have time on Friday, I'm possibly going to be doing an AEW Full Gear preview / predictions video, where if I do it in audio form, not only will I do the predictions, I'll give me thoughts about AEW as a whole so far. And obviously next week we're going to carry on We might do a Fave 5 Starrcade show either next week or the week after. But I am also going to carry on doing some Survivor Series rebooting videos. I've done 2 so far. One I've got in the pipeline is 2003. I'm just trying to put the card together. One more thing to look out. There might be an announcement about a Wrestling 2019 Q&A coming up, possibly next week. So keep your eyes peeled on that video. And until next time, guys, peace.